This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Welcome to Breaking Banks Europe, the #1 global fintech radio network. This is episode 243, and today's topic is news from the Fintech Front, namely what's happened in the month of August. I have two distinguished guests with me to talk about the news. First one is Dr. Ritesh Jain. He's known for his work in the payments innovation space, open banking, and digital public infrastructure. He has held key roles at HSBC, Visa, Apple, and Maersk, where he developed the Apple Pay tokenization stack and led major transformations. I also have Bruno Diniz, a managing partner at Spiralum Innovation Consultancy and a professor on financial innovation at the University of São Paulo. He's regarded as one of the top fintech influencers in Latam and has written 3 books: The Fintech Phenomenon, The New Financial Logic, and The Age of Crypto Economy. Thank you, both of you, distinguished folks, for joining us today. Thank you.
Pleased to be here, Liz.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Pleased to be here.
So I'm going to start with one of the subjects that I think, Ritesh, is kind of closer to your heart, just the fact that one of the big Dutch companies in the payment space, Adyen, is expanding into India. And, they're committing to having their innovation tech hub in Bangalore. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
So, yes, I can definitely talk about that. There are, India being one of the largest market and one of the largest country in the world as well in terms of the population. And with the robust digital payment infrastructure and growing requirement in the e-commerce, there are quite a lot of companies, those who are looking towards India to make their base as well as moving towards it. So Adyen is one of them, and others are like Stripe. They are making the waves as well towards moving into India, and so for some sort of partnerships too. So India is a very interesting market in the digital payments because India leads the digital payment globally. In terms of the monthly transaction we talk about, it's a multi-billion transactions in a month, right? And it is growing exponentially for the last few years. Now, one thing to look out for that what these payment companies has to offer apart from their infrastructure, because in payments in India, there is nothing much in terms of the value because there is a digital public infrastructure and which is more or less free. So the public goods are on top, sitting on top of it. So apart from commoditizing the merchant, we have to see that what these payment companies have to offer apart from their robust infrastructure and charging their customers.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move to another part of the world and talk about some commitments that a CBC, actually from Japan, Credit Saison, has committed to 200 million for Latin American startups. And some of that can go to startups in Mexico and others in Brazil. So I'm sure, Bruno, that you know a lot more about this than me. If you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, perfect, Elizabeth. Well, we've been witnessing right now a new moment for investing in fintechs in Brazil. So basically in Latin America as well. So we have this peak in 2021 of investments in the region. It was a progression that we took from 2016 up into 2021. And then we had the global crisis hit, and we had all those problems with fundraising for startups, not only in Latin America, but worldwide as well. This so-called startup winter and also the fintech winter, because we're talking about a part of this of this whole. But in the end, right now, we are witnessing 2024 a new moment for investments in the region. So this movement from Credit Saison is a positive indication that we're going to see more and more checks for the region. And I believe that the same thesis that brought investors in 2021 and even a little earlier than that was because we're seeing now lots of the problems in the region being solved through public infrastructure, just like as India got UPI have in Brazil Pix. So all these movements, this open finance that started the process in 2020 in Brazil, and in other countries like Chile, like Colombia, they are also in the process of implementing regulated version of open finance. So, and some movements around also the tokenization of the economy with CBDCs. When you sum it all together, we see that there is enough possibilities for investors to invest in new projects that are built on top of a new infrastructure. So I'm very confident that we're going to see cool stuff from there. So that's a positive indication, and going to have more others as well in the future.
And Ritesh, have you seen in India, that the startup winter is, for fintechs starting to change around, and there's more investment going to fintechs in India at the moment?
That is absolutely right. We are seeing the investments in the space, but there's a one thing that VCs are becoming much more cautious in terms of the investments. So they have got much more filters around, and the VCs are acting more like a micro private equity. So the due diligence are higher, and it's a cash fatigue at this point of time in the market overall. So people are cautious about where they are investing. So they are definitely looking. There's a bit more money in the scaled up environment than just the early stages.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely see that in Europe as well. So thank you for telling us a little bit about the investment landscape on these, two different continents. Now I'm going to go back to something that's closer to where you've worked. HSBC joining Nationwide and Lloyds in supporting open property data for smoother home buying for those folks in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about this, Ritesh?
Sure. It's a great news, to be honest, because when we look into, as Bruno said earlier about the open banking and my history with the open banking from day one or day zero, and it's great to see that there are movements in that space. So Open Data Network or Open Property Data Association is focused around digitization of the property data, which I see from a bigger picture. It's a movement towards open banking. And it's a collaboration of the data across the various entities, and which makes a lot easier for people to buy properties. And it's a win-win for financial institution, customers, and the regulator as well. So it's a lot of data movement. That's what we are going to see. It comes with quite a lot of responsibility as well. That is from the data protection security perspective. And that is the tenets of open banking and open finance regardless. So it's good news, and I'm looking forward to it.
Super. Now, Bruno, you had mentioned that in terms of open finance, the Central Bank of Brazil is regulating an environment that makes PIX viable with via NFC. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the implications for physical retailers, and later what some implications are with open banking for online retailers?
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's important to understand a little bit of what brought us here. So in 2020 was a pivotal moment, not only because of COVID and everything that happened, but here in Brazil, we started the process of regulating open finance. So it wasn't open banking here, open finance, because it was a broader scope. In the same year, by the end of 2020, PIX, which is our instant payments network, was also implemented by the central bank. So when you connect those two dots, you have also payments initiation and all of that. And we've been progressing in terms of numeric consents here in Brazil. Open finance is growing, but I also believe that the payments part of this is a very important factor. So payments initiation, for example, you still have some problems in terms of the journey, because we have the redirecting journey. where we got back to the institution environment to validate and then to do the transaction. And there's a new norm to adjust that to permit to have a more fluid journey. And also, the central bank just published a norm also making it possible for payments via NFC through Pix without redirection. So that's something that we're going to see. Pix grew a lot. Just for you to have a notion, in Q2 2023, Pix accounted for nearly 36.5% of all the payments in the country. It grew from 0 in 2020 up to 36, and now roughly 40%. And payment and wallets embedded into the phones, like the ones that we see in the credit card world, are very popular here. But once you connect that to the Pix reality, the open finance reality, I think it's going to boost even more the activity in this space and this public infrastructure as well. So
that's huge.
Yeah.
Did I understand that in 3 years that happened, or was it,
yeah, from 2020 to 2023, like Pix
amazing
for 36%. It's like 151 million people using it, and 14.6 million business using Pix. So it surpassed debit cards and other means of payment. But right now, I think there's even another chance to boost Pix in usability when you embed that possibility into the payments through NFC. So it's very popular, more popular. And NFC became more popular than QR code payments in Brazil after COVID. And so now Pix is going to surf into this direction using this possibility for the UX as well.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to another thing that you had mentioned about your central bank, and that is the second phase of the DREX. So migrating to a blockchain infrastructure and tokenizing deposits, which sounds like something that not a lot are willing to touch. So tell us about this.
Yeah, for sure. We've been... in 2020, we saw, like I said, Pix, Open Finance, and more recently, there's a project that's going on our local CBDC, which is DREX. It's a platform to tokenize the economy. So we're going to see the banks are going to tokenize their deposits. We're going to see other products based on this reality running through smart contracts with less intermediation and fewer costs. So that's the whole idea. And the cool thing is, some of the countries that already implemented their retail CBDC, like in Caribbean, there are 3 different ones: the $10, the Jain Dex, and there's another one that I'm not remembering right now. But there are 3 different projects that they are not going that well, because I think they're trying to solve a payments problem, and there's the adoption problem. In Brazil, in the payment side, Pix, it pretty much solved many things. But when you look at the other products, when you look at securitization of financial products and all of that, when you have blockchain infrastructure to deal with that and put everyone in the same infrastructure, in the same level, it really makes a big change in this other aspects of the financial market. So we still have, some countries are trying to solve payments problems through CBDCs. Here in Brazil, the tokenization of the economy with DREX, which is our CBDC, is going to solve other types of problems in the financial world. So making transaction 24/7, also in the stock markets and things like that. So it's going to be a huge change.
I would like to just...
Great. I was going to ask you to jump in on this.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I would like to just add over here, having been involved with the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, or the UPI and Pix are 2 love of life, and it's very interesting to see how Pix has picked up and learned from the mistake of others in the global market, especially from the UPI as well. and how it has gone ahead with the adoption. But when it comes down to the CBDCs, the central bank digital currency, there was still a reservation in terms of the retail adoption, and that's what we have seen a lot of economies failing in that. And when I say a lot of economies, that includes whether Nigeria or even India digital rupee, it hasn't seen the success. The reason is because we need to educate a customer in terms of the anonymity, in terms of the security of the product as well. And on the top of that, when there was a public in the economies where there is a strong digital public infrastructure, you need to have a stronger use case and rational for public to use digital currency, because your a stronger digital public infrastructure is going to solve the payments problem any which ways. So that's another aspect. That's what we are seeing globally.
And cool thing about that, Ritesh, I think that when you think about retail cases, I think that all those issues are valid. I believe that. But in Brazil, we're going to have both the wholesale version and the retail version. And the retail version will probably be used in cases like if I want to transfer to buy a home or buy a house or buy a home or buy an automobile, something like that. We're going to have the settlement through this network, through blockchain, is going to happen at the same time. So we're going to change the property of it at the same time in which the money is transferred. So in cases like this for bigger values, for in the retail, I think it's very positive and going to be interesting to see. But in the wholesale, trying to let the money that institutions transact between themselves is also a very cool case.
That's great, Bruno, because that's what we are seeing in the wholesale market. It's pretty flawless, right? It's adopted, it's working absolutely fine. In the retail, when I'm talking about the retail, it's the regular transactions. The high value transaction, yes, it makes sense. But when it comes down to the retail transactions, that's what we have seen with the Eneva in Nigeria failing to for the adoption by the customer in the retail transaction. That's where we are seeing the challenges. So yeah, that's where we need to work on the customer centricity as well as the customer education.
Perfect.
So let's keep with the retail sector and talk about the announcement of MetaMask that they have a partnership with MasterCard and how that will enable them people to spend crypto anywhere where MasterCard is accepted. Now, note this is for the EU and UK only. And Ritesh, I know there's been a lot of thought that you've been putting into this with different people on LinkedIn. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, is this going to work? Will it expand financial inclusion or not? Or what are going to be the issues here?
So there are different aspects to look into it. I won't get into the technicalities over here. And because for the technicalities, there's a LinkedIn post after the conversation with multiple organizations and the multiple roundtables. So I would please refer to that if you would like to understand a bit more technicalities around it. But fundamentally, it is going to be a game changer for a specific segment of the customer base. And we are going to see the adoption of that. But the beautiful thing which has come out of this that we have always been talking about the DeFi and the CeFi, which is the decentralized finance and the centralized finance. So what we are seeing, the centralized finance has got a significant role to play still in the decentralized finance space with the MasterCard partnership. So in this partnership, basically, it's going to be a debit card backed up by the currencies, which obviously throws significant amount of complexities for a regular user if you're not a regular to the cryptocurrencies or the stable coins. So that becomes a slightly challenging. But yeah, it's an excellent step in the way forward for decentralized finance, and the centralized finance to play a still significant role in that space.
And can you talk a little bit about financial inclusion and your thoughts on the difference with, financial inclusion versus financial literacy and what plays a role, be it here or in adjacents?
Thank you. So Bruno, you are in Brazil at the moment, and I've got quite a few colleagues of mine spending time across in Brazil with the G20 and GPFI, which is the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. Now, especially in this aspect of the financial inclusion with the MasterCard partnership, I don't see it's going to enhance the financial inclusion All right. And let me clarify this. The definition of the financial inclusion is slightly flawed because it's the problem is not the inclusion. The problem is the literacy in most of the part because the inclusion problem is, again, not a financial institution's challenge. It's a public policy issue. Right. So let me take you back to the digital infrastructure or digital public infrastructure and the outcome from the G20 as of last year when India had the presidency. There have been a lot of focus around the digital public infrastructure. And there are three parts of the digital public infrastructure, which is identification layer, your payments layer, and the data governance. Right. So once you have sorted out the identification layer, which in India is Aadhaar card, the unique identity, the payments layer, which is UPI, and the data governance. And data governance is still we're giving around that space. Right. So if the economies can work on the robust digital public infrastructure, they will be able to focus more onto financial inclusion in a better way, but still they will have to take a lot more effort on the financial literacy because literacy is a significant challenge. You can give an account to people, but people just don't need an access to account. What they need is to be educated that how they can use the accounts, how they can use the different financial products, or if they are taking money from where they should take money or from where they should not take money to get into the trap of a debt cycle.
So, Bruno, do you see this in Brazil as well?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Ritesh. I think it's perfect on spot. The thing is, when you look at the initiatives just like that from MasterCard, it's just like a bridge between the traditional financial market that we know and that whole crypto world that is already there, and there's a lot going on in this. But in terms of boosting financial inclusion, I don't think so. The cases for UPI and PIX proved to be, real interesting mechanisms of inclusion because we're making payments in small amounts for free. For example, in Brazil, we used to have a friction and have costs associated to that. When you have this infrastructure and it is easier for money to circulate in the economy, it's important. And the UX aspect as well is very important. But I believe I totally agree with Ritesh in this point.
If I can give you an example on that, in India, for that matter, or even in Brazil, for that matter, the candy business suffered a significant loss because of the digital payment infrastructure, because now people can pay fractions through their PIX or UPI. Earlier, what they used to do, they pay the money, and for the fractions, they used to get the candies back.
Yeah. That's happened in Brazil as well. The same thing. Yeah.
That's
cool
really
thing.
funny.
The emerging markets always do this stuff.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Very similar.
So I'm going to go to another story that has to do with MasterCard and the opportunity for fintechs who want to grow in Africa and the Middle East with the partnership that MasterCard has announced with Scale to give MasterCard issuing capabilities through Scale. So Ritesh, do you want to talk to this in terms of, will this help with financial opportunities? I'm not going to say financial inclusion because they need to understand what those opportunities mean, but will we see more, interesting fintechs coming up with solutions that are useful for consumers out there?
So I would definitely give it to MasterCard in terms of they are doing quite a significant amount of work for the financial inclusion, especially people like Shamina and her team, and the overall the Financial Inclusion Center within the MasterCard. And they're doing fabulous job across the growing economies. Now, let's come down to this partnership that is going to help fintechs for the business sponsorships, right? And that is a significant challenge for fintechs in the region as well. So when you work along with a larger player, it makes your life easier because they are going to bring the whole ecosystem to you. So they are building that whole ecosystem where they are enabling fintechs to build up different products and take it to the market. And in that, the regulator is playing a significant role as well. And apart from that, there's a role for sandboxes, right? So nowadays, when we think about the regulators' role, regulators are actually driving the innovation. We can talk about like fintechs are working as a catalyst to unleash and unlock the power of banks, but at the same time, the regulators are making it happen. Now, look into the phenomena of open banking. My good friend today just mentioned about something in different chats from the UK. So as I said, like I was from the day zero in the open banking, and that's what led by regulators. Regulator made it happen. If it was just down to the banks, they were not interested in open banking, because open banking is like, if I go rustic, it's like washing up your dirty laundry in an open space. You're opening up your data for everybody else, and banks were very cautious about it.
Banks would definitely not be wanting to do that. And I think that the UK regulator that has competition in their remit is a little bit different than maybe some of the more conservative ones in Europe, like the Dutch regulators, for example. But I do definitely agree that some regulators like UK have, with open banking and some other things, and the sandboxes really made it much easier to be able to innovate and push innovation in their countries. And I'd like to also discuss what the central bank in Brazil is doing with their Center of Excellence for Data Science and AI. So, what are they, if you're talking about regulators, what are they doing to promote some of these innovations? And after that, Ritesh, I'd like to hear what's happening on the Indian front on that side.
Cool. So talking about the what's going on in Brazil, it was like published recently this norm on the Center of Excellence for Data and in Artificial Intelligence. Is another positive step from the Central Bank of Brazil, because besides all the efforts from digital public infrastructure, PIX, with open finance, with tokenization of the economy, now the central bank just gives a signal to the market that they are really wanting to understand. And the creation of the center is basically to work on the ethics part of AI and data science. Is very important. It's growing in importance nowadays. The models need to be explainable for the central bank that's going to supervise institutions using it. And not only for that, they created the center also to bring along and bring together researchers and people from the market that can really discuss that and formulate some proposals for the society. And not only that, to train internal staff as well, because the staff of the central bank will need to understand more about this emerging tech, which is artificial intelligence, especially generative artificial intelligence. So it's a very positive step, looking at the world of the central banks and things like that.
Ritesh, I have a question that has to do with AI and our inherent biases and how that can affect financial inclusion. Do you see governments, be it the Indian one or others, that are looking at how can we ensure that, we don't put these kinds of biases in, or that, we're checking to make sure that when we have them in, we can get them out so that certain populations are not included?
Excellent question, Elizabeth. Let me take you to the pandemic, right? What happened during and after the pandemic with the multiple banks and financial institutions? I wouldn't say multiple, I would say more or less all of them, right? Their systems, their risk management, their algorithms have went for a toss, because they were seeing a different data altogether, right? So ultimately, when we talk about artificial intelligence or machine learning or any other system, right, it is dependent on the data and the modeling. Now, if the data is because of the data change during the pandemic, it has thrown out different results altogether that have been handled over the period of time with the manual interventions, as well as with updating the systems as well. But let me come back in terms of the biases in the system that is inherent, right? Data is a bias. Let's be realistic. Now, what we need to do, let me give you an example about what we did at HSBC at one point of time. We hired third-party agencies, specifically expert into the AI governance, to do an audit on us and to make sure that our algos or AI is not biased, or our system is not biased when it comes down to the credit rating or the credit lending. And that's what organization needs to do. But at the same time, the regulators are coming hard on this as well. So regulators are already working on a governance process for the financial institutions for the implementation of AI within the systems. It's early days because regulators learn, the technology is ahead and regulators are learning as well. But rest assured that they are working on it. And when it comes down to the AI, let me tell you another interesting fact. When I say I was leading future of payments at Visa at one point of time, a part of it. And we've implemented something like RTS, which is the real-time scoring. And that was in 2009, 2010. That is now around 15 years back. And we used to do the scoring of the authorization transaction before the authorization in real time. And that was AI. We never called it AI. That's a different thing, right? But it was AI. So nowadays we hear quite significant amount of words AI and ML, which is great. But at the same time, let's be realistic. How much AI is getting implemented in the system? That's what matters, right? What are the use cases where we are implementing the AI and what sort of governance is required? We are still working through it, but we hear quite a lot because it's a syllable.
Thank you. Bruno, do you want to comment on that, or should I go to my last question?
No, just very quickly. That's on spot as well. Again, Ritesh, and I believe that the hype over AI, it's out there. It's already happening. Some cases, like in Gen AI, they're going to come into the market sooner or later. But I think it's cool for the regulator to understand that regulation always lag as compared to tech. But it's important for them to have that under the radar and try to connect to other players, other stakeholders in the market, to create some frameworks. Specifically, when you're talking about bias and ethics, it's very, very important before things start happening very fast and they're not looking at that. But on spot.
I'm going to move to another regulatory issue, and it's a compliance one that folks might have seen that last week. The SEC fined 26 broker-dealers who had, for a combined almost 400 million penalty, who had been using services like WhatsApp to speak to clients. Now, these unauthorized messaging services, really big companies that we all know, like Wells Fargo, SocGen, BNP, they were hit. Is this something that shocks the two of you, that they're non-compliant or having trouble enforcing compliance, or what have you? Do you think we're going to see more of it, or do you think that they're going to tighten the belt?
Elizabeth, it's very interesting, and I'm not surprised with the SEC slapping up with the heavy fines. If you look into the fines in large financial institution on any year basis, it shouldn't be a shocker or surprise to anybody. Now, what we really need to learn, and the financial institution need to learn heavily, that when they are dealing with the money and when they are dealing with the customer, a significant risk is involved, and that's what they are getting lessons day in and day out. But still, unfortunately, there was a preferred method of communications, and there's a strict regulation around that by the regulators globally. But unfortunately, the large financial institutions or even the small players follow unregulated practices. It's a shame. Sorry to say this, but there's a stricter regulation apart from the fines need to come into place to restrict this. Let me give you an example just about SEBI, the Security Exchange Board of India, right? It's a major market. Around 5% of the people have got access to the equity market or the exposure to the equity market, 5% of the whole population, right? Which is still low in comparison to the developed market. So it's a growing market, but the phenomenon in the market is phenomenal. It's in growth, it's in rising. But at the same time, when you look into the Western advisors, investment advisors in the country like India, that is in thousands, right? That is significantly low. But actually, you go and search in the market, you will find tens of thousands of people who are providing the advices. And that's need to be regulated.
Interesting.
Otherwise we are seeing a massive trouble. And I'm sure, the growing economies, the regulators are pretty stringent, and they are slapping or notices, as well as coming up with the regulations around that who can advise, what can advise, and how they need to be communicated as well. And on the top of that, I'm sure you must be seeing quite a lot of influencers,
absolutely,
influencing the people without the right education, right degree, right
exactly.
sort of information, right? So,
do you think that they will at some point get fined?
They should be and will be regulated. They will be fined. There have been cases in the various economies where the influencers have been fined for providing non-regulated information or advisory services to their communities, and which should be taken up very, very seriously.
Bruno, do you agree with this? And you're seeing some of this also in Brazil?
Well, basically, that's the age of communication. So the means, it's going to be WhatsApp, it's going to be whatever. So that happens, long before this conversation is happening right now. But apart from that, I think that the things about influencers in Brazil, there is a new rule right now about that. They are working on a rule for that because some of the influencers became just so huge, and they are really influencing markets and stocks, so they need to be regulated, and that's something in the works right now in the country.
Absolutely. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have these 30 minutes with the both of you to discuss the news in August. And I would love to be able to do this again, be it news or what's going on in the ecosystems where you're from. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with Fintech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.